Did you know that the flying saucers in this movie were actually just pie plates spinning through the air? In 1956, before computers could create anything on screen, artists had to build everything by hand. Earth versus the Flying Saucers became one of the most famous alien invasion films ever made, not because it had the biggest budget or the most famous stars, but because a small team of dreamers figured out how to make the impossible look real. They used simple objects, clever camera tricks, and pure imagination. The spaceships looked enormous and terrifying on screen, but behind the scenes, they were small enough to hold in your hands. This movie scared audiences across America, made children hide behind their seats, and changed the way Hollywood thought about science fiction forever. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Number 20. The Master of Monsters built the saucers. Ray Harryhausen was the man who made the flying saucers come alive, and he didn't use computers or digital effects because those things didn't exist yet. He used something called stop-motion animation, which meant he had to move tiny models by hand, one frame at a time. Imagine taking a photograph, moving a small spaceship just a tiny bit, taking another photograph, moving it again, and doing that thousands and thousands of times. That's exactly what Ray did. Each second of film needed 24 separate photographs, so even a short scene of a saucer flying across the sky could take days to finish. Ray worked alone in a small studio, moving models under hot lights, sweating through long nights, checking every shadow and every angle. He didn't have a team of hundreds like modern movies do. He was one man with a dream and a table full of miniatures. The saucers in the film looked huge and heavy, spinning through the air with perfect balance. But in reality, they were lightweight models suspended on thin wires that Ray had to hide from the camera. He painted backgrounds, built tiny buildings, and created explosions using cotton and light bulbs. When audiences saw the saucers destroy Washington, D.C., they believed it completely. They had no idea one patient artist made it all happen, frame by frame, hour by hour. What looked like a massive invasion was actually one man's imagination made visible through thousands of tiny movements. The magic wasn't in the budget, it was in the dedication. Number 19. Real military footage made it feel true. The filmmakers didn't have enough money to create every single shot. They went to the United States military and asked if they could use real footage from actual training exercises and weapons tests. The military said yes, probably because they thought the movie would make them look heroic and prepared. So the film mixed Ray Harryhausen's handmade saucers with genuine shots of real army bases, real jets taking off, and real artillery firing into the sky. When you watch the movie, you're seeing actual soldiers running across actual fields, not actors pretending. This made everything feel more serious and more frightening because half of what you saw was completely real. The directors carefully matched the lighting and the grain of the film stock, so the real footage and the fantasy footage blended together seamlessly. Audiences in 1956 had no idea which parts were staged and which parts were real, and that confusion made the invasion feel even more possible. The government scenes, the radar stations, the control rooms, many of those were actual military facilities. Producers saved money, but they also gained something more valuable: authenticity. When the saucers attacked those real buildings and real landscapes, it felt like the invasion was happening to the real world, not just a movie set. The blend of reality and fantasy created a documentary-like feeling that other science fiction films didn't have. It wasn't just a story anymore. It felt like a warning. Number 18. The script was written in only 2 weeks. Hollywood usually takes months or even years to write a screenplay, with teams of writers arguing over every word and every scene. But Earth versus the Flying Saucers didn't have that luxury. The studio wanted the movie made quickly to compete with other alien invasion films that were becoming popular, so they hired writers George Worthing Yates and Bernard Gordon to finish the script as fast as possible. 2 men locked themselves in a room with typewriters, coffee, and a stack of science fiction magazines for inspiration. They worked morning, afternoon, and night, typing page after page, barely sleeping, barely eating. In just 2 weeks, they had a complete screenplay ready to shoot. The speed shows in some places. The dialogue is simple, the characters don't have complicated backstories, and the plot moves forward like a freight train with no time for side trips. But that simplicity also made the story easy to follow and exciting to watch. There were no slow moments, no boring conversations, just action and tension from beginning to end. The writers borrowed ideas from real UFO sightings that were being reported in newspapers at the time, adding details that made the story feel current and popular. They didn't have time to overthink or second-guess themselves, so they trusted their instincts and wrote what felt exciting. That rawness gave the script energy and urgency. Sometimes limitations create better art than endless freedom. Rush didn't ruin the movie, it made it sharper. Number 16. The saucer design came from real UFO reports. In the 1950s, newspapers and magazines were filled with stories about strange objects in the sky. People across America claimed they saw spinning discs, glowing lights, and mysterious crafts hovering over farms, cities, and military bases. Some reports were probably misidentified planes or weather balloons, but others remained unexplained and fueled the public's fascination with the possibility of alien visitors. The filmmakers didn't want to invent a spaceship design from pure imagination. They wanted their saucers to look like the objects people were actually reporting. So they studied witness descriptions, examined sketches that appeared in UFO magazines, and looked at photographs that claimed to show real flying saucers. They noticed that most reports described the same basic shape, a smooth metallic disc with a dome on top, spinning silently through the air. Ray Harryhausen took those details and turned them into physical models that matched the popular image of what a flying saucer should look like. The saucers in the movie have that classic dome, that shiny metal surface, that sense of weightless rotation. When audiences saw them on screen, they recognized the design from the news stories they'd been reading. It made the invasion feel less like fantasy and more like a logical extension of current events. The filmmakers tapped into existing fear and curiosity, using the culture's own imagination against it. Saucers didn't look alien because they were too strange. They looked alien because they were exactly what people expected and feared. Familiarity made them more frightening, not less. Number 15. The destruction of Washington, D.C. shocked audiences. In 1956, most movies still treated American landmarks with respect and patriotism. You didn't show the Capitol building exploding. Those images felt unpatriotic, almost sacrilegious. But Earth versus the Flying Saucers broke that unwritten rule and showed national monuments being destroyed one by one. Ray Harryhausen built tiny models of famous buildings, then used his animation skills to make them collapse in spectacular detail. Some people felt genuinely upset, as if watching something sacred being violated. Others felt thrilled by the audacity of it, the willingness to show that even the heart of American power could be vulnerable. The destruction scenes were beautifully crafted, with each building collapsing in a unique and realistic way. Ray didn't just make things explode randomly. He studied how real structures fail under stress, how weight shifts, how materials break. The result was devastation that felt physically accurate and emotionally heavy. For many viewers, this was the first time they'd seen their own country's symbols destroyed on screen, and it planted a seed of fear that would grow in American cinema for decades to come. The scene wasn't just exciting, it was a cultural moment. It showed that no place, no matter how powerful or important, was truly safe. That idea was new, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. Number 13. The movie was filmed in only 15 days. 15 days. That's all the time the crew had to film every scene with live actors. Most feature films take months to shoot, with breaks for weather, script changes, and actor schedules. But this production was on a tight budget and an even tighter deadline, so the director, Fred Sears, had to move fast. Every morning, the cast and crew showed up knowing they had to complete multiple scenes before sunset. There was no time for endless takes or perfectionism. If an actor flubbed a line but the scene still worked, they moved on. If the lighting wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, they kept going. The actors memorized their lines quickly, hit their marks without rehearsal, and trusted the director's instincts. The crew worked with military precision, setting up cameras, adjusting lights, recording sound, and tearing everything down to move to the next location. Fred Sears kept the energy high and the pace relentless, never letting anyone slow down or second guess. He knew that momentum was everything. If they stopped to overthink, they'd fall behind and run out of money. The speed gave the performances a raw, immediate quality. The actors didn't have time to get comfortable or polished, they just reacted and moved forward. Urgency shows on screen in the best way. The film feels alive and spontaneous, not overworked or artificial. 15 days sounds impossible, but the team made it happen through focus, skill, and sheer determination. They didn't waste a single hour. Number 12, Ray Harryhausen worked without a safety net. When Ray Harryhausen animated the flying saucers and the destruction scenes, he didn't have the luxury of digital backups or undo button. Every movement he made was permanent. If he bumped a model accidentally or moved it too far, that mistake would appear on film, and he'd have to start the entire sequence over from the beginning. There was no computer to save his progress, no way to erase a bad frame. He worked with film stock that was expensive and limited, so he couldn't afford to waste it on mistakes. Each frame had to be perfect the first time. The pressure was enormous. Ray would spend hours setting up a single shot, adjusting the model by fractions of an inch, checking the lighting, making sure the background lined up correctly. Then he'd take one photograph. Then he'd move the model again, barely touching it, and take another photograph. One sneeze, one shaky hand, one moment of lost concentration could ruin hours of work. He worked in complete silence, barely breathing, his entire body tense with focus. Sometimes he'd work for 12 hours straight without a break, too afraid to stop because stopping meant losing his rhythm. When he finally finished a sequence and saw it projected on screen, moving smoothly and looking real, the relief and pride he felt made all the stress worthwhile. But until that moment, he was walking a tightrope with no safety net. Modern animators can save their work every few seconds and fix mistakes with a mouse click. Ray had no such comfort. His art required absolute precision and nerves of steel. Every frame was a small miracle. Number 11. The film's budget was only $300,000. $300,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in Hollywood terms, it was tiny, even in 1956. Big studio films were spending millions on elaborate sets, huge casts, and expensive special effects. Earth versus the Flying Saucers had to create an alien invasion, destroy national monuments, and build believable spaceships with a fraction of what other films had to work with. Every dollar mattered. The producers couldn't afford to build full-size spaceship interiors, so they used small sets and clever camera angles to make rooms look bigger. They couldn't hire hundreds of extras, so they used the same 50 people over and over, changing their costumes and positions to make crowds look larger. They saved money by using stock footage, reusing props from other films, and shooting scenes in real locations instead of building expensive sets. Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion animation was chosen partly because it was cheaper than building full-scale mechanical saucers. Despite the tight budget, the filmmakers never let the movie look cheap. They spent money where it mattered most, on the effects, on the models, on the details that would show up on screen. They cut corners in places the audience wouldn't notice and focused their resources on moments that would amaze and terrify. The final film looks far more expensive than it actually was, a testament to the crew's creativity and resourcefulness. They proved that imagination and skill can overcome financial limitations. Money helps, but vision matters more. The small budget forced them to think smarter, work harder, and make every choice count. Limitations didn't weaken the film, they sharpened it. Number 9. The saucers were only 8 inches wide. When you watch the flying saucers glide across the screen, spinning silently over cities and military bases, they look massive, big enough to carry dozens of alien soldiers and powerful enough to destroy buildings with energy beams. But in reality, the models Ray Harryhausen built and animated were only about 8 inches in diameter, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. He crafted them from lightweight materials like wood, plastic and metal, shaping and sanding them until they matched the design sketches perfectly. Then he painted them with metallic paint that would catch the light in just the right way, making them look like polished steel. He built several identical saucers so he could use different ones for different scenes, and he added tiny details like panels, seams, and domes to make them look complex and real. When he filmed them, he used forced perspective and careful lighting to create the illusion of enormous size. He placed the small models close to the camera and the background elements far away, tricking the eye into seeing depth and scale that didn't actually exist. He also filmed the saucers moving slowly and smoothly because fast, jerky movements would have revealed their small size and light weight. The illusion worked perfectly. Audiences believed they were seeing massive spacecraft, not tiny models on a tabletop. The secret wasn't expensive technology, it was patience, skill, and understanding how the human eye perceives distance and size. Ray turned 8-inch toys into planetary threats. The small scale didn't limit him, it freed him to control every detail with precision. Big isn't always better. Sometimes small is exactly what you need to create something huge. Number 8. The director died 2 years after the film was released. Fred Sears, the man who directed Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, didn't live long enough to see the movie become a cult classic. He was only 44 years old when he died of a heart attack in 1957, just 2 years after the film premiered. Fred had worked in Hollywood for years, directing low-budget westerns, crime dramas, and science fiction films, always working quickly and professionally, never complaining about tight schedules or small budgets. He was known as a reliable journeyman director, someone studios could count on to deliver a finished product on time and on budget. Earth vs. the Flying Saucers was one of his final projects, and though he didn't know it at the time, it would become his most remembered work. Fred approached the film with the same no-nonsense efficiency he brought to all his projects. He didn't waste time on artistic flourishes or ego-driven decisions. He focused on telling the story clearly, keeping the pace moving, and making sure the special effects had time to shine. He trusted Ray Harryhausen completely, giving him the freedom and support to create the visual magic that made the movie special. Fred's direction is invisible in the best way. It doesn't call attention to itself, but it holds everything together. After his sudden death, Hollywood mourned quietly and moved on, as it always does. Decades later, when people revisit Earth vs. the Flying Saucers and appreciate its craftsmanship and excitement, they're also appreciating Fred's steady hand and clear vision. He deserved to see his work celebrated, but fate didn't allow it. His legacy lives on in every frame. Number 7. The film inspired future alien invasion. Stories Earth vs. the Flying Saucers didn't invent the alien invasion genre, but it perfected a formula that countless movies and TV shows would copy for decades. Before this film, most alien stories were either campy monster movies or cerebral philosophical tales. This movie found a middle ground. It was serious enough to feel real, but exciting enough to thrill audiences. It showed a clear structure, mysterious signals, first contact, miscommunication, escalating conflict, devastating attack, desperate defense, and final victory through human ingenuity. That pattern became a template. Films like Independence Day, Mars Attacks, and War of the Worlds owe a debt to the blueprint established here. The flying saucers attacking famous landmarks became iconic, repeated so many times it became a visual shorthand for alien invasion. The idea that aliens might not come in peace, that first contact could mean war, that humanity's survival would depend on scientists and soldiers working together, all of these concepts were crystallized and popularized by this film. Actors like Steven Spielberg and Roland Emmerich grew up watching Earth vs. the Flying Saucers and absorbed its lessons about pacing, spectacle, and tension. The movie proved that you didn't need a massive budget to create convincing large-scale destruction, that practical effects and clever camera work could deliver stunning visuals, and that audiences craved stories where ordinary people faced extraordinary threats. It set a standard for what alien invasion films should look and feel like. Even now, when filmmakers plan a scene where spaceships destroy a city, they're consciously or unconsciously referencing the destruction of Washington, D.C. in this movie. The influence is everywhere, even if modern audiences don't recognize the source. One small film changed the language of science fiction forever. Number 5. Real scientists consulted on the screenplay. The writers wanted the science in the movie to sound believable, even if it wasn't entirely accurate. So they reached out to actual scientists, engineers, and military consultants to help them write dialogue that sounded authentic and create scenarios that felt plausible. These consultants reviewed the script, suggested technical terms, explained how radar worked, and described what a real military response to an invasion might look like. They helped the writers avoid obvious mistakes that would make informed audiences laugh or lose interest. Of course, the film still takes huge creative liberties. The science is more fiction than fact, but it has just enough real detail to feel grounded. When Dr. Marvin talks about magnetic fields, wave frequencies, and propulsion systems, the words sound technical and precise, even if the concepts are invented. The presence of real scientists in the development process gave the filmmakers confidence to present the story seriously without winking at the camera or treating it like a joke. The consultants also helped design the laboratory sets and scientific equipment, making sure that the instruments and machines looked functional and realistic. They explained what oscilloscopes and radar screens actually displayed, so the props department could create convincing replicas. This attention to detail paid off. Audiences in 1956 didn't have the internet to fact-check every claim, but they could sense when something felt researched and thoughtful versus when it was just random nonsense. The scientific consultants added a layer of credibility that elevated the entire film. They built a bridge between fantasy and reality, letting audiences suspend their disbelief more easily. The fiction felt possible because it was built on a foundation of real knowledge. Number 4. The movie was released during peak UFO hysteria. 1956 was a unique moment in American culture. The Cold War was intensifying, nuclear weapons testing continued, and newspapers regularly reported strange objects in the sky. People were genuinely anxious about the possibility of threats from above, whether Soviet missiles or alien visitors. The public's fascination with UFOs had reached a fever pitch. Books about flying saucers became bestsellers, radio shows discussed alien encounters, and the government released conflicting statements about whether the sightings were real or misidentified aircraft. Into this atmosphere of uncertainty and fear came Earth versus the Flying Saucers, a film that tapped directly into the national mood. It wasn't released into a vacuum. It arrived at exactly the right cultural moment when audiences were primed to believe the story could actually happen. The timing amplified the film's impact. People didn't just watch it as entertainment. They watched it as a possible preview of the future. Some viewers left the theater looking up at the sky nervously, half expecting to see a spinning disc hovering overhead. The film's marketing played up the connection to real UFO sightings, using taglines that suggested the story was based on true events and expert research. The line between fiction and reality blurred just enough to make the movie feel urgent and relevant. The cultural context turned a modestly budgeted science fiction film into a phenomenon. It wasn't just reflecting the fears of the time, it was actively participating in them, shaping how people thought about the unknown objects being reported across the country. The movie became part of the larger conversation about what was really out there in the skies above America. Number 2. The film was almost called Invasion of the Flying Saucers. The title of a movie matters more than people realize. It's the first thing potential audiences see, the phrase that will appear on posters and in newspaper ads, the words that will either draw people in or turn them away. The producers of this film went through several possible titles before settling on Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Early in development, The film was going to be called Invasion of the Flying Saucers, a straightforward title that clearly communicated what the movie was about. But the producers worried it sounded too passive, too vague. Invasion didn't suggest action or conflict, it just described a situation. They wanted something more dynamic, something that implied a fight, a struggle, a battle with stakes. Someone suggested Earth versus the flying saucers, using the word versus to frame the story as a contest between two forces. Versus implied confrontation, competition, survival. It suggested that Earth wasn't just being invaded, it was fighting back. The title promised action, resistance, and drama. The change might seem small, but it made a difference in how audiences perceived the film. Earth versus the Flying Saucers sounded like an event, a showdown, a clash of titans. It gave the story a sense of scale and importance. The title told people this wasn't just a story about scared humans running from monsters, it was about humanity, standing up and fighting for survival. The marketing department loved it. The posters looked more exciting, and audiences responded. A good title can't save a bad movie, but it can help a good movie find its audience. The producers made the right call, and the title became iconic, copied and parodied for decades. Number 1. The film predicted real space program technology. Here's the strangest and most fascinating fact. Some of the fictional technology shown in Earth versus the Flying Saucers actually predicted real advancements in space science and military defense. When the scientists in the film study the alien saucers and try to understand how they work, they discuss concepts like electromagnetic propulsion, gravitational manipulation, and advanced radar tracking. At the time, those ideas were purely theoretical, the stuff of science fiction and wild speculation. But in the decades after the film's release, researchers working on space programs and military projects began developing systems that echoed some of those fictional concepts. The idea of using magnetic fields to influence propulsion, the development of sophisticated radar networks to track objects in the sky, the study of gravitational effects on flight, all of these became real areas of research. Obviously, the scientists weren't copying the movie, but the film's writers had done enough homework and talked to enough consultants that they accidentally touched on ideas that would later prove important. The movie also predicted the public's demand for transparency about aerial phenomena. In the film, the government tries to hide the truth about the saucers, but eventually has to reveal everything to prevent panic and coordinate a defense. Decades later, real debates about government disclosure of UFO sightings followed a similar pattern, with citizens demanding answers and officials slowly releasing information. The film understood that secrecy breeds fear and suspicion, and that openness, even about frightening topics, is healthier for society. It's eerie how a low-budget science fiction film from 1956 managed to anticipate not just technological developments, but cultural and political conversations that wouldn't happen for another 50 years. The filmmakers weren't trying to predict the future, trying to tell an exciting story. But in doing so, they touched on truths that wouldn't become obvious until much later. Sometimes imagination sees further than we realize. Bonus fact, the lost prologue. That nearly changed everything. Most people who watch Earth vs. the Flying Saucers today don't know that the film originally had a different opening, a prologue that was shot but never included in the final cut. In this lost sequence, the movie began not with Dr. Marvin's narration, but with a documentary-style presentation showing real UFO sightings from around the world. The filmmakers gathered newsreel footage, eyewitness accounts, and dramatic reenactments of famous sightings, presenting them in a serious, almost educational manner. The idea was to establish from the very first frame that the film's story, while fictional, was rooted in real phenomena that people were actually experiencing. The prologue was meant to blur the line between fact and fiction even further, priming the audience to take everything that followed more seriously. But during test screenings, the producers discovered a problem. The prologue was too effective. It made the film feel less like entertainment and more like a propaganda piece or a government warning film. Some audience members became genuinely disturbed, worrying that the invasion depicted in the movie might actually be imminent. Others felt misled, expecting a documentary and feeling tricked when the fictional story began. The tone was too heavy, too somber, and it drained the fun and excitement from the adventure that followed. So the decision was made to cut the entire prologue and start the film with Dr. Marvin's voiceover instead, easing audiences into the story more gently. The deleted footage was stored away and eventually lost or destroyed, as often happened with unused material in that era. Only a few people who worked on the production ever saw it. Today, film historians wish the prologue still existed, because it represents a bold creative choice that might have changed how audiences understood the entire film. Instead of a thrilling alien invasion movie, Earth versus the Flying Saucers could have been something stranger and more unsettling, a hybrid of documentary and drama that challenged the very idea of what a movie could be. But that version exists only in memory now, a ghost of what almost was. Sometimes the boldest ideas are the ones that never make it to the screen. Earth versus the Flying Saucers is more than just a science fiction film from the 1950s. It's a testament to what imagination, skill, and determination can accomplish even with limited resources and impossible deadlines. It reminds us that the best stories don't always come from the biggest budgets or the most advanced technology. Sometimes they come from a small team of artists working late into the night, moving tiny models by hand, blending reality with fantasy, and believing completely in the world they're creating. The film captured a specific moment in history when the sky felt full of possibility and danger, when humanity looked up and wondered what might be looking back. It tapped into fears that felt urgent and real, and it offered a kind of hope, the hope that human ingenuity and courage could overcome even the most overwhelming threats. Decades later, the movie still works because the emotions behind it are timeless. We still wonder what's out there. We still fear the unknown. We still hope we'd rise to the challenge if we had to. The flying saucers may have been 8-inch models, the destruction may have been carefully controlled animation, and the invasion may have been pure imagination. But the heart of the story was real. It was about people facing the impossible and refusing to give up. That's a story that never gets old. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them one story at a time.